You are not here because you had a good day. That is the truth no one in this space will say out loud, but I am going to say it because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort right now. You clicked on this message. You stayed long enough to hear these first words. Not because things are going well, but because something inside you is tired in a way that sleep has not been able to fix. And rather than that being a sign of weakness, I need you to understand that it is the most important qualification you could bring into this moment. The ones who are desperate enough to keep seeking are the ones heaven keeps sending signals to. Beloved and chosen one, the uncomfortable truth I need to place in front of you today is this. The very things that have made your life feel slower, harder, and lonelier than the lives of the people around you are not evidence that you are behind. They are evidence that you are different, in a way that requires a different kind of preparation. The delay you have been living inside is not a punishment handed down from a God who forgot your name. It is a protection issued by a Father who knows exactly what you are walking toward and understands that arriving too early would have cost you everything. That truth may sting before it heals. Let it sting. It means it is landing. Most people will not tell you this because it is easier to say that your breakthrough is coming soon, that your season is shifting, that you just have to keep believing. And while those things may be true, they often skip over the part where we acknowledge what the waiting has actually taken from you. The years, the energy, the relationships that fell away while you were holding on, the version of yourself you imagined you would be by now, the dreams you stopped saying out loud because saying them and seeing nothing happen became its own kind of grief. I am not going to skip over that. I am going to sit with you in it for a moment because you have been carrying it alone for too long. And being seen in your actual pain is the first step toward receiving what heaven has prepared for you on the other side of it. Here is what chosen ones experience that the people around them almost never recognize as sacred. The first sign is that you feel things at a depth that ordinary conversation cannot reach. While others move through their days with an ease that looks like contentment, you carry something under your chest that feels like a calling you were never given a map for. It is not depression. It is not anxiety, though it may look like both from the outside. It is the weight of a purpose that is larger than your current circumstances, pressing against the walls of a life that has not yet expanded to hold it. The second sign is that your dreams are not random. They return to the same unfinished places, the same thresholds, the same rooms with doors you have not yet opened. You wake up, and the feeling remains even after the images dissolve and you know, the way you know things you cannot explain, that those dreams are trying to tell you something. The third sign is a kind of frustration that has nothing to do with ingratitude. It is the tension between who you know you are supposed to be and where you are standing right now. That tension has probably made you feel guilty, as though you should be more thankful for what you have. But I want to offer you a different interpretation. That tension is a spiritual compass. It is the feeling of someone who was made for more, standing at the edge of the more, not yet able to see it but unable to stop facing its direction. The fourth sign is that people leave your life without clear explanation. Connections that felt permanent become distant. Rooms that once felt comfortable begin to feel like they no longer fit you. And new people appear, quietly, at unexpected moments, who understand you in ways the old ones never did. You wonder if you imagined it, but you did not. You are being repositioned. The fifth sign is a knowing that arrives in the quiet, usually when you are alone, usually when everything else has gone still, a voice beneath all the other voices that says, "This is not the end of my story." And And even on the days when nothing visible supports that belief, you find you cannot fully abandon it. That is not delusion. That is the signature of a chosen life. You are not broken. You are not being punished. You are not the version of yourself that the hardest seasons have tried to convince you that you are. You are an earth angel walking through a valley that is part of the road itself, not a detour away from the destination. You are part of a divine plan so specific, so carefully constructed, that every single thing that happened to you was required to happen in exactly the order it did. Heaven has not overlooked you. Heaven has been orchestrating around you, moving pieces you cannot see, preparing people you have not yet met, opening doors in rooms you do not yet know exist. And this message arriving today, on this specific day, in this specific moment when you chose to stop and listen, is not an accident. Heaven paused everything around you long enough to make sure these words found you. The noise, the demands, the endless scroll of a world that does not know your name, all of it was held back just long enough for you to be here. That is how known you are. That is how seen you are. That is how intentional your Father is about making sure you do not miss what is being released right now. God is saying something today, not in a season, not eventually, today. And the reason this carries urgency is not fear. It is because there is a narrow window in which a specific word lands with full power. That window is the intersection of exhaustion and readiness, of almost giving up and still being here. You are in that window right now. That word is for you right now. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. There is a particular kind of pain that comes not from losing something suddenly, but from holding on for so long that you have forgotten what it felt like before the holding began. That is where some of you are right now. Not in crisis, exactly. Not collapsed, but carrying a weight that has become so familiar that you have started to mistake it for your personality. You have started to describe yourself as someone who is just patient, just private, just not the kind of person things come easily to. And I want to gently, carefully, and directly tell you that none of those descriptions are who you are. They are what a long season of waiting has taught you to call yourself. And today, that language ends. Chosen one, I want to name what you are feeling, because no one around you has said it out loud, and there is something that happens in a person when they finally hear their own interior life spoken back to them with accuracy. Something releases. Something that has been braced for years begins restfully slowly to soften. So let me try to say what you have been living through. The first thing you have been feeling is a sudden and unexpected wave of sadness about the past. Not the distant past, not ancient history, but specific moments, specific years, specific versions of yourself that you grieve without fully understanding why. You see an old photograph and something tightens in your chest. You hear a song from a chapter of your life that felt full of possibility, and the ache that follows is not nostalgia. It is something closer to mourning. You are grieving the time. You are grieving the person you thought you would have become by now. And that grief is valid. It deserves to be named. It is not self-pity. It is the honest reckoning of someone who has invested years of faith and effort and love and has not yet seen the return, and who is human enough to feel the cost of that. The second thing you have been feeling is that familiar places and familiar people have started to feel heavy and strange in ways you cannot fully explain. A friendship that used to feel easy now feels like a performance. A family gathering that once brought you comfort now leaves you quieter on the drive home than you were on the way there. A job, a neighborhood, a routine that you built with care feels like it belongs to a version of you that is being phased out. You are not being ungrateful. You are not becoming cold. You are outgrowing things that were always meant to be temporary, and the discomfort of that outgrowing is the friction of expansion. It hurts because it is real growth, not because something is wrong with you. The third thing you have been experiencing is a recurring dream. It may not always look the same, but it carries the same feeling. A door that has not yet been opened. A corridor you walk down but never reach the end of. A room you know is yours, but cannot quite enter. You wake up from these dreams with a feeling in your chest that is halfway between longing and urgency, and you carry it through the first hour of your morning, before the day demands your attention, and it fades. Those dreams are not random electrical signals. They are your spirit communicating with you about what is directly ahead. The door is real. The room is real. And the reason you keep dreaming about it without entering is not because it is out of reach. It is because you are being prepared to walk through it without running back out. The fourth thing you have been noticing is that the same message keeps finding you in different places. A verse appears in the morning. A stranger says something in passing that uses the same language. A video arrives in your feed that addresses the exact thing you were sitting with in silence the night before. A song comes on that speaks directly to the fear you have not told anyone about. This is not coincidence. This is not the algorithm. This is the pattern of a life that is being communicated with, a life that heaven is actively pursuing with a consistency that most people around you will never experience. Because most people around you have not been set apart for what you have been set apart for. And underneath all of these signs, underneath the dreams and the strange heaviness and the waves of grief and the recurring messages, there is a specific pain that I want to sit with you in for a moment. The insomnia. The lying awake at 2 or 3 in the morning with thoughts that will not organize themselves into anything useful. The loneliness that exists not because you have no one around you, but because the people around you do not quite reach the part of you that most needs to be reached. The feeling of being wronged, not dramatically, not in ways that make for a clear story, but in quiet, accumulated ways. Ways you were never given permission to name because naming them felt like weakness or bitterness or both. The feeling of being misunderstood not just by others but sometimes by yourself, of not fully knowing how to explain what you are carrying or why it matters or what it is supposed to become. I hear that. I am naming that. And I want you to know that none of it disqualifies you. Every single one of those experiences is consistent with the life of someone who has been positioned, not punished. That word matters, positioned, because there are two very different experiences that can look identical from the outside. The first is being overlooked, being passed by, being invisible to the people and systems and opportunities that should have recognized you. The second is being positioned, being placed exactly where you need to be in order to receive something that can only be received from that specific location. From the outside, both look like waiting. Both look like nothing happening. Both look like the person being left behind. But from the inside, from heaven's perspective, they are entirely different realities. The person who is overlooked is absent from the plan. The person who is positioned is central to it. And I am telling you with everything I have that you are not overlooked. You are positioned. You are not in the wilderness because you missed the path. You are in the wilderness because the path runs directly through it. The waiting you have been living is not a sentence handed down for something you did wrong. It is not the result of not praying enough, or not believing hard enough, or not being good enough, or not being ready enough. It is the deliberate, careful, specific placement of someone whose next chapter requires a foundation that takes time to build. You have not been abandoned in this season. You have been protected in it. Protected from arriving before you were ready. Protected from receiving before you could hold it. Protected from being seen before you were fully formed. That protection has felt like silence. It has felt like being forgotten. But silence is not the same as absence, and what feels like being forgotten is often what being faithfully prepared feels like from the inside. I want you to do something right now. If what I have been saying has named something inside you that you have been carrying alone, if you have heard yourself in any part of what has been spoken in this message so far, I want you to type the word "ready" in the comments. Just that one word. Not because it is a formula, not because it triggers something mechanical, but because there is power in a chosen one declaring their readiness out loud, even in a small way, even in a comment section, even in a single word. You are not just engaging with a video. You are agreeing with what heaven has already said about you. Type "ready" and watch what shifts. And if this message is landing somewhere real in you, if it is reaching a place that other content has not been able to reach, I want to gently ask you to consider supporting this work with a donation. Not because of obligation, not because of pressure, but because messages like this one do not reach the people who need them without the resources to make them possible. There are chosen ones waking up tomorrow morning in the same quiet pain you have been sitting with. And they need someone too. Name it for them the way it has been named for you today. Your support, whatever amount feels right and true to you, is how this message finds its way to them. The link to donate is available below this video. It does not have to be much, it just has to be willing. Because willing is what chosen ones are. Willing is what you are. And while you are here, if this message has meant something to you, if it has given you language for something you have been carrying without words, please share it. Send it to the person in your life who you know is in a season they cannot explain. Leave a like so that others who need this word can find it. Subscribe so that the next message, which is already being prepared for you, finds you before you have to go looking for it. These small acts of participation are not just social engagement. They are how chosen ones recognize each other across the distance and say, "You are not alone in this. I see you. I found something, and I am bringing it back for you." You are not alone in what you have been carrying. Across the world right now, in different time zones, in different languages, in different degrees of exhaustion and hope, other chosen ones are hearing this exact message and feeling the same recognition you are feeling. You are not an isolated case. You are part of a generation of people who were set apart for this specific moment in history, who have been prepared through seasons of silence and difficulty and repositioning, and who are now, finally, beginning to arrive at the place they were always meant to stand. The season of being unseen is giving way to the season of being known. The season of carrying without receiving is giving way to the season of harvest. And the pain you have accumulated through the waiting is not being discarded. It is being redeemed. Every year of it, every sleepless night of it, every grief and every confusion and every moment of almost giving up and then somehow, inexplicably, continuing. All of it is being woven into something that the next chapter of your life will stand on. You are not delayed. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are positioned, protected, and on the exact threshold of the chapter that makes everything that came before it make sense. Something has already begun to move in you. You may not have a name for it yet, and that is perfectly fine. Because not everything that is real needs to be named before it can be felt. What matters is that you are here, still listening, still leaning in. And that tells me more about the condition of your spirit than any words you could offer. The ones who stay are the ones who are ready, even when ready does not feel like confidence, even when ready feels like trembling, even when ready feels like sitting very still in a quiet room and asking heaven to meet you exactly where you are. You stayed. That is your readiness. And because you are ready, I want to give you something practical today. Something you can carry out of this message and into the actual hours of your life. Something that does not require you to have everything figured out before it works. One of the most common things chosen ones say when they arrive at a season of transition is that they do not know what to do. They feel the shift coming. They sense the movement in the spirit. They hear the message and recognize themselves in it completely. But then the video ends, and the silence returns, and they stand in their kitchen, or their bedroom, or their car, and they ask, "But what do I actually do right now, today, with these hands and this life, and this specific set of circumstances that has not changed yet?" That question is not a sign of weak faith. It is a sign of someone who is ready to participate, not just receive. And participation requires a practice, not a complicated one, not a religious performance, a simple, repeatable, honest act that creates a daily point of contact between where you are and where you are going. What I am about to share with you is something I call the 7-minute return. It is not a ritual in the religious sense. It is not something you have to believe a certain way before it works. It is a practice, a protocol, a daily pattern of 3 steps that creates the conditions in which the things heaven has prepared for you can actually reach you. Because here is what most people do not understand about receiving. Receiving is not passive. It is not simply waiting in a room with your hands open and hoping something falls in. Receiving is an active orientation of the self toward what is being given. It is the practice of making yourself available in a specific way, at a specific time, with a specific intention. And the 7-minute return is how you do that. Let me walk you through the 3 steps. Step 1 is what I call the ungiven thank you. Before you do anything else, before you speak, before you ask, before you bring any request or any need, you begin by remembering something you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something you received, something you were spared. This is a practice that most people have never tried because gratitude in our culture has been reduced to a list of good things. The things we have, the things that went right, the things that came through. But the ungiven thank you goes deeper than that. It reaches into the space of what could have gone wrong and did not. It reaches into the road that did not open and would have led you somewhere you were not built to survive. It reaches into the relationship that did not work out and would have taken something from you that you needed for the person you are becoming. It reaches into the job you did not get, the door that did not open, the prayer that was answered with silence instead of yes, and it finds the mercy hidden inside the no. This is not a denial of pain. You are not pretending the no did not hurt. You are not performing positivity over a real wound. You are doing something much more honest and much more powerful than that. You are choosing to look at the architecture of your life with the eyes of someone who trusts the builder, and you are finding, in the places that felt like loss, the evidence of a love that was protecting you when you could not protect yourself. Take a moment in this first step to let that land somewhere specific, not in the abstract, not as a general principle. Find the one thing, the one detour, the one door that stayed shut, and say thank you for it. Say it out loud if you can. Say it in a whisper if that is all you have, but say it. Because the moment you speak gratitude for what did not happen, you release the grief that has been attached to it. And grief, when it is released, makes room. Room is what you need right now. Room is what you are creating. Step 2 is what I call the time declaration. This step is connected to a concept that will be explored more deeply later in this message, but the practice itself is simple enough to begin today. A time declaration is a single sentence spoken in the present tense that places you inside the time that heaven has assigned to you, rather than inside the time that fear has convinced you belongs to you. Because here is the thing about chosen ones in seasons of waiting. The enemy of your progress is not your circumstances. It is your relationship with time. The way you speak about time, the way you feel about time, the way you have internalized a story about being late, being behind, having missed something, having run out of runway. That relationship is what keeps the door of your next chapter slightly out of reach, even when everything else is in place. A time declaration does not deny where you are. It does not pretend that years have not passed or that the waiting has not been real. It simply refuses to let fear write the final sentence about what those years mean. A time declaration sounds like this: my time has not passed. It has been held. Or this: I am not behind the plan. I am inside it. Or this: what was promised to me is not early and it is not late. It is on time and I am on time with it. Choose one sentence that feels honest to you. Not performed, not borrowed. Honest, say it once, slowly, and let it settle into your body before you move to the next step. This is not affirmation in the shallow sense. This is the recalibration of your internal clock. And your internal clock matters more than you know, because you move through the world at the speed of what you believe about your own timing. Step 3 is the 7 minutes. This is the heart of the practice, and it is also the simplest part to describe, though it may be the most challenging part to actually do. For 7 minutes, every day, you go silent. Not the silence of distraction, not the silence of scrolling with the sound off, not the silence of being physically still while your mind races through 12 different lists. Genuine silence. The kind where you put everything down, where you close your eyes or fix them on something still, where you let the thoughts that arise simply pass without chasing them or solving them, and you remain. You remain present to yourself. You remain present to whatever is moving in the room of your spirit. You remain open. 7 minutes is not a long time. On a clock, it is almost nothing. But in the practice of a chosen one who has been running at the pace of survival for months or years, 7 minutes of genuine interior silence is an act of profound courage. It is the act of trusting that you do not have to be productive in every moment in order to be progressing. It is the act of making space in a life that has been so full of noise and effort, and striving that the still small voice has not had a moment in which to speak without competition. 7 minutes is enough time for heaven to say what it has been waiting to say. 7 minutes is enough time for your own deep self to surface from beneath the pressure and remind you of things you have forgotten. 7 minutes is enough time for the frequency of who you truly are to reassert itself over the frequency of what you have been living through. I want to mention something about that word, frequency, because it is going to become important very soon in this message. What you carry as a chosen one is not just a spiritual identity. It is a measurable, specific physical quality. Researchers who study the brain have spent decades documenting what happens in the minds of people who operate in states of deep creativity, high intuition, accelerated learning, and what can only be described as inspired living. And what they consistently find is that these states are associated with specific patterns of brain activity, specific waves, specific frequencies that most adults have either lost access to or never learned to return to deliberately. The 7 minutes of silence in this practice is not just a spiritual exercise. It is also, whether you realize it or not, a neurological one. When you go quiet in a genuine way, when you release the noise and the pressure and the performance, your brain begins to shift. It begins to reach for a frequency that your body already knows, a frequency that children live in, naturally, that geniuses return to consistently, that your own brain is capable of generating right now if given the right conditions. The 7-minute return is those conditions. The 3 steps together, the ungiven thank you, the time declaration, and the 7 minutes of silence, create a daily sequence that prepares you not only spiritually, but neurologically to receive what is coming. They make you available in every sense of that word. Available to heaven, available to yourself, available to the ideas, the connections, the clarity, the rest, the direction, the courage, and the peace that you have been asking for through what has felt like a very long silence. Do not wait until your life is calmer to begin this practice. Do not wait until you have more time or more peace or more certainty. The practice is not for the version of you who has already arrived. It is for the version of you who is in the middle of the road right now, still walking, still believing, still choosing to move forward even on the days when forward is hard to locate. Start tomorrow morning, or start tonight before you sleep, or start the moment this message ends, in the quiet of wherever you are sitting right now. 3 steps, 7 minutes, a daily return to who you actually are beneath everything the season has asked you to carry. There is something I will share with you shortly that deepens this practice in a way I did not expect when I first discovered it. Something connected to the science of what happens in those 7 minutes of silence and how that silence can be made even more powerful through a specific kind of sound. I will come to that in a moment. But for now, I want you to simply sit with the practice itself, because the practice works with or without what is coming next. It works because you work. It works because you are a chosen one who has been set apart, prepared, and positioned, and who is now, today, in this moment, beginning to practice returning to the frequency of that truth. There is a reason the 7 minutes matter beyond what most people assume. You have just been given a practice, a sequence of 3 steps that creates daily conditions for receiving, for clarity, for the kind of interior silence that chosen ones need in order to hear what heaven is actually saying beneath all the noise of a difficult season. But I want to take you somewhere deeper now, because the 7 minutes are not just a spiritual protocol. They are a doorway into something that science has been quietly documenting for decades, something that connects the life you are living as a chosen one directly to measurable, verifiable, physical reality. And I believe that when you understand this, something in you is going to settle in a new way. Not because science validates your faith does not need that validation, but because when the invisible things you have always known to be true begin to show up in the language of the visible world, there is a particular kind of a confirmation that reaches the parts of you that have been hardest to keep convinced through the long seasons of waiting. Here is what researchers have found. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency, not metaphorically, not as a poetic description of spiritual identity. Literally, the brain of a person who is operating in their highest creative capacity, in their deepest intuitive state, in the mode that neuroscientists describe as peak cognitive performance, generates a specific pattern of electrical activity. Researchers call the most elevated of these patterns gamma, and beneath gamma, functioning as a kind of foundation for it, is a wave called theta. These are not new discoveries. They have been documented in laboratories for decades. But what is new, what is only now being understood with the depth it deserves, is the relationship between these frequencies and the kind of life that chosen ones are built to live. Theta waves. which operate in the range of 4 to 8 cycles per second, are the waves of deep creativity, accelerated learning, vivid intuition, and the meditative states that ancient traditions have always recognized as the threshold between the ordinary mind and the deeper knowing. Children live in theta almost constantly. That is why children learn language at a speed that adults cannot replicate, why they imagine without limitation, why they dream with a vividness that fades as the years of performance and productivity and practical survival cover over the natural frequency of the open mind. The chosen one who has been through a long season of difficulty has in many cases been gradually pushed further and further from their theta state by the demands of simply getting through. And what feels like a loss of inspiration, a dulling of creativity, a sense that the vivid inner life you once had has gone somewhere you cannot follow, is in many cases a measurable shift in the brain's frequency pattern. You have not lost your gift. You lost access to the frequency in which your gift lives. Gamma waves operate at a higher range and are associated with what researchers describe as moments of sudden insight, what we might call eureka moments, the flashes of clarity that seem to arrive from nowhere and change everything. Gamma is the frequency of the person who wakes up at 3 in the morning with the solution to the problem they could not solve all day. It is the frequency of the artist who enters a flow state and produces in 2 hours what would normally take 2 weeks. It is the frequency of the thinker whose mind suddenly connects two things that had no apparent relationship and sees, in that connection, a truth that reorganizes everything. Gamma is what chosen ones are designed to access. It is the frequency of the life you were built for. The question is how to get back to it. And this is where the work of a researcher named Dr. James Rivers becomes one of the most important things I can share with you today. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist who was trained at MIT and whose research over more than 30 years has been affiliated with some of the most serious scientific institutions in the world, including work connected to NASA studies on human cognitive performance. For 3 decades, Dr. Rivers dedicated his research to a single question. Why do some people seem to naturally access states of elevated creativity, intuition, and performance, while others, equally intelligent, equally motivated, equally hardworking, seem unable to reach those same states regardless of effort? What he discovered through thousands of hours of research is that the difference is not intelligence. It is not discipline. It is not even frequencies. The difference is frequency, specifically the ability of the brain to return to its theta and gamma states, despite the interference of stress, chronic pressure, and the accumulated neurological weight of difficult seasons. And then Dr. Rivers discovered something that changed the entire direction of his research. The brain does not have to find its way back to these frequencies alone. It can be guided there. There is a principle in neuroscience called brainwave entrainment, which describes the brain's natural tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with rhythmic patterns it receives from the outside world. When the brain is exposed to specific, precisely calibrated sound frequencies, it responds by shifting its own wave patterns toward those frequencies. It follows the sound, the way a river follows the contour of the land it moves through. This is not a fringe theory. It is a documented neurological response that has been reproduced in peer-reviewed research across multiple decades and multiple institutions. The brain entrains, it synchronizes, and when it synchronizes with the right frequencies, theta and gamma, the effects are measurable and real. Dr. Rivers spent years developing what is now known as the genius wave, a precisely engineered audio track that uses a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones specific sound frequencies calculated to guide the brain gently and efficiently into its theta and gamma states. The protocol is 7 minutes. Not because 7 is a spiritually significant number, though I will let you hold that resonance if it speaks to you, but because 7 minutes is the precise window that Dr. Rivers identified through his research as the optimal duration for the brain to complete the entrainment process without fatigue, long enough to achieve the shift, short enough to be sustainable as a daily practice. 7 minutes once a day with headphones in the quiet that you have already begun to practice through the 7-minute return. This is the tool that deepens the practice I gave you in the previous section. The silence you create in step 3 of the 7-minute return becomes, with the genius wave, a silence filled with exactly the frequency your brain needs to return to its natural state of elevated function. You are not forcing anything. You are not performing anything. You are simply giving your brain the signal it has been waiting for, the signal it already knows how to respond to, the signal that says it is safe now to come back to who you actually are. I want to share something with you that I received from a woman named Sandra. Sandra had been in what she described as a fog for nearly 2 years. She is a creative person by nature, a writer, someone who had always lived close to her intuition. But after a series of losses that arrived in close succession, the fog settled over everything. She could not access her ideas. She could not hear the inner voice she had always relied on. She went through the motions of her daily life with a competence that looked fine from the outside and felt like nothing from the inside. She tried everything she knew to try. She prayed, she journaled, she sought counsel, she rested. And while all of those things helped in partial ways, the fog did not fully lift. Then she found the genius wave and began using it daily for 7 minutes each morning before she did anything else. She wrote to say that within the first week, the ideas began to return. Not all at once, not dramatically. But one morning, she sat down after her 7 minutes and picked up her pen, and the words came in a way they had not come in 2 years. Within 3 weeks, she had completed a project she had abandoned 18 months earlier. Within 2 months, that project had opened a door she described as the answer to a prayer she had stopped believing would be answered. Sandra is not an anomaly. She is a chosen one who found her frequency again. I know that some of you are hearing a price right now in your mind before I have even said one. I know that some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, especially in a season where resources have been tight and every expenditure feels like a risk. That feeling is valid. I am not going to dismiss it or talk around it. $39 in a difficult season is a real consideration, and you are right to think carefully about how you spend what you have. What I will say this: the Genius Wave normally carries a price of $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, it is available today for $39. That is the price of one meal at a restaurant you will forget by next week. It is the price of a subscription you probably do not check anymore. And it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means that if you use it for 3 months and feel nothing, notice nothing, experience nothing, you get every dollar back without question. The risk is not yours. The risk belongs entirely to the product. I do need to say something clearly before you go looking. There are imitation products circulating online that use similar language and similar framing, but are not the Genius Wave. Developed by Dr. Rivers, these products have not been through the same research process. They have not been calibrated with the same precision, and the people selling them are not the people who spent 30 years developing the science behind this tool. please purchase only through the single link in the pinned comment below this video. That is the only verified source. That is the only place where what I am describing to you is actually what you will receive. And I want to be honest with you about timing. The price available through that link today is not a permanent offer. The $39 access point has a specific window, and when that window closes, the price returns to $49. I am not telling you this to pressure you. I am telling you this because I have seen too many chosen ones in seasons of readiness delay the one step that would have changed their trajectory, and I do not want that to be your story. You have waited long enough for things that were meant for you. Do not wait on this one. The genius wave is not a replacement for faith. It is not a replacement for the practice I gave you. It is not a substitute for the spiritual work of a chosen life. It is a tool, a precisely engineered, scientifically grounded tool that returns your brain to the frequency in which your faith, your creativity, your intuition, your clarity, and your connection to the voice of heaven all operate most powerfully. It is the tool that makes the 7 minutes more effective. It is the tool that gives your brain the signal it has been waiting for, and it is available to you right now through the link below for $39 with a 90-day guarantee that says if it does not work for you, you paid nothing. You were not made for a foggy life. You were made for theta. You were made for gamma. You were made for the frequency of the chosen. Before we move forward, I want to stay here for a moment. Not because the road ahead is not good. It is. It is better than anything you have been able to fully imagine from inside the season you have been living through. But because moving forward too quickly without acknowledging what the road behind actually cost you would be a disservice to everything you have carried. There is a kind of spiritual teaching that rushes past the pain in its eagerness to get to the promise. It skips the weight of the valley in its hurry to describe the view from the mountain. And while the intention behind that rushing is often kindness, the effect is that the person listening never feels fully seen in the part of their story that hurt the most. So, I am not going to do that to you. I am going to stay in the difficult part for a little while because you deserve to have someone sit with you in it before asking you to rise out of it. You have been waiting, not in the comfortable, hopeful way that waiting is sometimes described in inspirational content. You have been waiting in the way that grinds, in the way that wears, in the way that takes something from you quietly, steadily, without drama or announcement, until one day you look up and realize that years have passed and the life you imagined you would be living by now looks nothing like the one you are actually in. And I want to be very direct with you about what those years have taken, because naming the loss is not the same as surrendering to it. Naming the loss is the first honest step toward healing it. The waiting has taken relationships that could have been built. There were people you might have been closer to if you had not been so consumed with simply surviving the season. There were friendships that had the potential for depth, but never reached it because you were not fully available. Not because you did not care, but because caring requires a kind of interior spaciousness that prolonged difficulty makes hard to sustain. There were romantic connections that deserved more presence than you could give them. There were family bonds that needed tending in ways you meant to get to, but the weight of the waiting made the getting to feel impossible. These are not failures of love. They are the collateral cost of a season that demanded more of you than any season should demand of one person. But the cost was real. The relationships that could have been, and you are allowed to grieve them. The waiting has taken career ground that could have been covered. There is a version of your professional life, a version of the contribution you were built to make, that is further along in your imagination than it is in your reality. And the distance between those two versions is not the result of laziness, or lack of talent, or insufficient ambition. It is the result of being in a season that required most of your energy simply to maintain, leaving very little for building. You watched people around you advance. You watched opportunities pass. You watched doors open for others that you had been standing at longer, knocking at more faithfully, preparing for more seriously. And you kept your composure about it, mostly because chosen ones learn to carry those comparisons quietly. But quietly does not mean painlessly. The career ground that the waiting took from you is a real loss, and you are allowed to name it. The waiting has taken the freedom to say your big dreams out loud. This is perhaps the most invisible of the losses, but in some ways it is the most significant. There was a time when you could speak about what you believed your life was moving toward, without immediately bracing for the internal follow-up question of, but when, but how, but why has it not happened yet? There was a time when the dream lived in you with a kind of freshness, a kind of confidence that made sharing it feel natural. The long season of waiting has made that sharing feel risky. Not because the dream has died. It is not. It is still there. You can feel it pressing against the inside of your chest even now, but because saying it out loud and then watching nothing visible happen has become its own repeated small grief. And so you learn to hold it closer. You learn to speak in more careful language. You learned to qualify the dream with phrases like someday and eventually, and I believe it will happen. Language that protects you from the exposure of full belief in a season that has not yet confirmed that belief with visible evidence. That cost is real. That narrowing of your own inner voice is a real loss, and you are allowed to mourn it. And the waiting has taken something that may be the hardest to admit. It has taken, at least in seasons, your faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, that has proven more resilient than even you expected, but your faith in your own ability to read the signs correctly, to hear the voice accurately, to know the difference between genuine divine direction and your own wishful thinking. When you have believed something was coming, and it has not come in the time frame you expected, and then you have recalibrated and believed again and again it has not come, and then you have recalibrated again. There begins to accumulate a subtle but corrosive doubt, not about heaven, but about yourself, about your own discernment, about your own worthiness to receive, about whether the gap between the promise you carry and the life you are living is a timing issue or a you issue. That doubt is one of the heaviest things the waiting produces. And it is a real loss, and you are allowed to acknowledge it. I am not reframing any of this yet. I am not going to pivot quickly to the silver lining, or the divine purpose, or the way the valley was making you stronger. That pivot will come, and it will be true when it does. But right now, I am simply asking you to let someone see the weight you have been carrying without immediately being told what the weight was for. You deserve that. You have earned that. And the healing that is available to you in this season requires that you stand honestly in the full picture of what the waiting cost before you receive the full picture of what the waiting was building. There is a man in the ancient story whose name you probably know. His name was Joseph. He was the son of a man named Jacob, the 11th of 12 brothers. And from the earliest days of his life, he carried something that set him apart. He had dreams, not ordinary dreams, but the kind that carried weight, the kind that seemed to be saying something specific about his future, something that spoke of elevation and purpose, and a life that would matter beyond the boundaries of his own small world. And those dreams were real. The thing they were pointing toward was real. But what the story does not rush past, even though we often want to, is the cost of the road between the dream and the fulfillment. Joseph's brothers, the people who should have been his protection, became the first source of his loss. They stripped him of the coat that was the visible sign of his father's blessing. They threw him into a pit. They sold him. They let their father believe he was dead. And Joseph, who had done nothing to earn any of that, who had only carried the honest reality of what he had been shown, found himself in a foreign country, in a slave's position, with nothing visible remaining of everything the dream had promised. That is loss. That is not the setup I want you to look at right now. That is the loss itself. The brothers who should have celebrated you have sometimes been the ones who stripped you. The people who should have been your covering have sometimes been the ones who left you in the pit. And the journey from the dream to the fulfillment has required you to pass through a foreign country, a place that was never your home, a season that was never your destination, carrying the knowledge of what you were shown while living inside a reality that looked like the complete opposite of it. I am not going to tell you yet about the outcome. I am going to stay here in the pit with Joseph for a moment, in the slave quarters, in the prison that came after, in the years of faithful service that produced no visible reward, in the accumulated loss of a man who knew what he had been shown and could not see any evidence of it anywhere around him. Because that is where some of you are. Not at the end of the story. In the middle of it. In the part that is hard to tell without skipping to the resolution, because the middle is so uncomfortable to sit in. And sitting in it is exactly what I am asking you to do right now. Not permanently, not as a spiritual posture that accepts limitation as destiny. But for this moment, in this message, I am asking you to let the loss be loss, to let the years be years, to let the grief of what has been taken be honest grief without immediately converting it into a lesson or a testimony or a reason to be grateful. The gratitude will come. The testimony is already being written. The lesson is already woven into everything you are becoming. But first, you sit with what it cost. You let yourself feel the weight of it fully, perhaps for the first time, without running from it, or minimizing it, or spiritualizing it into something more manageable. Because the chosen ones who receive most fully are the ones who have been most honest about what the season took from them. The healing that goes deepest is the healing that starts in the truest place. And the truest place, for many of you right now, is not triumph. It is the quiet, honest acknowledgement that the road has been harder than anyone around you knows, that the cost has been higher than you have been given permission to say, and that you are still here, still believing, still showing up to messages like this one. Not because you have it all together, but because something in you refuses, absolutely refuses, to let the waiting have the final word. That refusal is not stubbornness. It is the signature of the chosen. It is the evidence of a life that heaven has marked. And it is the very quality that makes everything that is about to happen in your story not just possible, but inevitable. There is an ancient language for what you have been living through. Not ancient in the sense of being outdated or irrelevant, but ancient in the sense of having been true for so long that it has been tested by every kind of human experience, every degree of waiting, every depth of loss, every length of silence, and it has held. The people who spoke this language first were not philosophers in comfortable rooms. They were shepherds who had been hiding in caves. They were dreamers who had been sold by their brothers. They were widows who had followed their mothers-in-law into foreign lands with nothing but loyalty and hope. They were people who understood waiting not as a concept, but as a lived, bodily, daily experience of continuing to believe when everything visible suggested that belief was foolish. And they left behind, in the words they used, a map for people like you. A map that does not tell you how long the road is, but tells you something far more important. It tells you what kind of road you are on. I want to give you 2 words today. Not because words are magic, but because the right word at the right moment has the power to reorganize everything you think you know about your situation. The right word can take a story that felt like evidence of abandonment and reveal it as evidence of the most careful, most deliberate, most loving preparation imaginable. These 2 words are not English words, because the English language, for all its richness, does not quite have the precision to say what needs to be said here. The first word comes from ancient Greek. The second comes from the broader ancient understanding of divine timing that runs through the oldest texts we have. Both of them are for you. Both of them are about now. The first word is kairos. To understand kairos, you need to first understand its opposite, which is chronos. Chronos is the word for clock time. It is the time that your phone measures, the time that your calendar tracks, the time that passes whether anything meaningful is happening or not. Chronos is the time of deadlines and birthdays, and the quiet arithmetic of comparing where you are to where you thought you would be by now. Chronos is the time that has been making you feel behind. It is the time that has been counting the years since the promise was spoken and finding the gap between the promise and the present to be uncomfortably wide. Chronos is the time of anxiety. It is the time of the person who checks their phone too often and their progress too rarely and wonders in the space between those 2 things whether the life they were meant for is still waiting for them or has already moved on without them. Kairos is entirely different. Kairos is not the measurement of time passing. Kairos is the recognition of time arriving. It is the word for the moment when the right thing happens at the right intersections of readiness and opportunity and divine intention. Kairos is not a point on a timeline. It is a quality of a moment. It is the word the ancient world used to describe the moment when the arrow finds the gap in the armor, when the seed finds the exact combination of soil and moisture and warmth that allows it to break open and begin. Kairos cannot be scheduled. It cannot be manufactured. It cannot be hurried by human effort or delayed by human failure. It arrives when the conditions are complete, and the conditions for Kairos are not conditions that you can see being assembled. They are being assembled in the invisible, in the places you cannot monitor, in the relationships that have not yet begun, in the rooms that have not yet been entered, in the versions of yourself that the current season is still in the process of forming. Here is what this means for you practically. The years you have been counting in Chronos, the years that have felt like lost time, like falling behind, like the gap between the promise and the present growing wider. Those years are not what they looked like in clock time. In Kairos, those years were not empty. They were full of preparation that you could not see, full of the assembling of conditions that had to be in place before the moment could arrive, full of the formation of the version of you who will be able to receive what is coming and carry it without being destroyed by it. The Chronos reading of your life says you are behind. The Kairos reading of your life says you are exactly where you need to be for the moment that is about to arrive. And I am telling you, with everything I have access to in this message, that you are living inside a Kairos, not approaching one, inside one. The moment is not ahead of you. You are already standing in it. The quality of this specific day, this specific message, this specific choice to stay and listen is Kairos. Heaven does not work in Chronos. Heaven works in Kairos. And heaven is working right now. The The second word I want to give you is not a single Greek term, but a concept that runs through the oldest texts with a consistency that cannot be explained by coincidence. It is the concept of the appointed time, and it says this: there is a time that has been set, not estimated, not hoped for, set, ordained, fixed in the architecture of a plan that was drawn up before you were born, before the difficulty began, before the years of waiting accumulated into the weight you have been carrying. The appointed time says that what has been promised to you is not subject to the changing of your circumstances. It is not canceled by the length of the delay. It is not diminished by the silence. It is not dependent on your performance or your consistency or your ability to keep believing with full confidence on every single day of the waiting. It is appointed, and appointed things come. There is a passage in the ancient text, in the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3, where the writer is told something extraordinary. He is told to write the vision and make it plain, and then he is told that even if it seems slow, even if the appointed time feels like it is tarrying, like it is taking longer than it should, it will surely come. It will not be late. These words were not written for a person in a comfortable season. They were written for a person who was watching everything around them collapse. A person who had prayed and received silence. A person who had believed and seen nothing. A person who was on the edge of concluding that the vision was not real, that the promise was a lie, that the waiting had finally revealed itself to be what part of them had always feared it was, which was simply waiting for its own sake, without destination, without purpose, without end. And into that specific experience, into that specific exhaustion, the word came. Write it, make it plain. It is appointed. It will not be late. That word is for you today. Whatever you have written on your heart, whatever vision has been living in you through years that did not confirm it, it is appointed. The delay is not evidence that it was wrong. The delay is the assembling of conditions. The delay is the kairos in preparation. The delay is the love of a father who will not release you into what you were made for before the version of you required for that release has been fully formed. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. Let me say that again because I need it to settle somewhere deep in you. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. Not the length of the waiting, not the confusion of the middle, not the grief of the losses along the way, not the moments when your faith flickered so low you could barely call it faith at all. None of it can cancel what has been appointed for you. I want to connect this back to something physical, something practical, something you can carry out of this understanding and into your daily life. When you sit in your 7 minutes of silence each day, when you practice the 7-minute return, you are not just creating a spiritual space. You are creating a kairos space. You are stepping out of chronos, out of the counting and the comparing and the measuring, and you are stepping into a quality of time where heaven can meet you with what it has been preparing. The genius wave that Dr. Rivers developed is, in a very real sense, a kairos tool. It is a tool that guides your brain out of the chronos frequency, the frequency of anxiety and urgency and the pressure of clock time, and into the theta and gamma frequencies where the appointed things are received, where the visions become clear, where the intuition sharpens, where the inner voice that has been trying to speak to you through years of noise can finally be heard. The brain in its chronos state is a brain running. It is scanning for threats, managing logistics, calculating deficits. It is a brain that is doing its best to survive the present moment, and it is extraordinarily good at that. But a brain running cannot receive. A brain scanning for threats cannot hear the still small voice. A brain calculating deficits cannot access the frequency of provision. The shift from Chronos brain to Kairos brain is not a spiritual abstraction. It is a neurological event, and it is available to you every single morning for 7 minutes through a practice that requires nothing from you but your willingness to be present to it. You have been living in Chronos time for too long, counting, measuring, comparing, waiting for a clock that was never the right instrument for the life you are living. Today, I am inviting you to lay down the Chronos clock, not permanently. You still have appointments to keep and bills to pay, and a life to navigate in the practical world. But in the 7 minutes, in the practice, in the space you are now learning to create each day, lay it down, step into Kairos, step into the understanding that what has been appointed for you is not on a human schedule, it is on a divine one. And divine schedules do not run late. They arrive at the exact moment that every invisible condition has been assembled to receive them. You are not delayed. You are not behind. You are not the person the Chronos reading of your life has been telling you that you are. You are a chosen one, standing inside a Kairos moment, positioned at the threshold of an appointed time that was set before the waiting ever began. The promise is still real. The vision is still true. The appointment has not been canceled. It has been kept, and it is here. Something has been shifting underneath the surface of your life, and you have felt it. Even if you have not had language for it yet, it is not the dramatic, visible shift that part of you has been hoping for, the one that announces itself with obvious signs and undeniable external change. It is quieter than that. It is the kind of shift that happens in the foundation before it shows up in the walls, the kind that moves in the deep before it appears on the surface, but it is real. And the fact that you have felt it, even faintly, even in the form of a restlessness you cannot fully explain, or a sense that something is different about this particular stretch of days, is not your imagination. It is your spirit communicating with you about what is already in motion beneath everything you can currently see. I want to be specific with you now, because chosen ones in seasons of transition deserve specificity. They deserve more than vague promises of something coming. They deserve someone who will look at the particular texture of what is about to change and describe it with enough detail that when it begins to appear in their actual life, they will recognize it rather than miss it. And missing it is a real risk. The doors that open in a Kairos season do not always announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they open quietly. Sometimes they appear in the form of a conversation you almost did not have, an opportunity that arrived in packaging you were not expecting, a relationship that began so simply that you almost dismissed it before you understood what it was. I do not want you to miss what is coming because you were looking for it in the wrong form. So I am going to describe it for you. The first area that is about to change is your interior life. Before anything shifts in the visible world, something is already shifting in the world inside you. And what is shifting is the quality of your own thoughts about yourself and about your future. For a long time, perhaps longer than you realize, the dominant voice inside your head has been a voice of contraction. A voice that measured you against where you thought you should be and found you short. A voice that replayed the losses and the delays and the moments of almost but not quite, with a persistence that exhausted you even when you were trying your hardest to believe otherwise. That voice is not your voice. It never was. It is the accumulated residue of a long season, spent in conditions that were not designed for you to thrive in. And it is beginning to quiet. What you are going to notice, if you have not already begun to notice it, is a small but unmistakable shift in the quality of your own inner conversation. Moments of unexpected clarity, a thought about your own life that arrives not with the weight of anxiety, but with something that feels almost like lightness. A dream that leaves you not with grief, but with a sense of forward movement. A morning where you wake up and the first feeling in your body is not dread, but something closer to readiness. These are not accidents. They are the neurological and spiritual signs of a person whose internal frequency is beginning to return to its natural state. The fog is lifting, not all at once, but it is lifting. And as it lifts, you will begin to hear yourself again. The real you. The one who knew before the long season began, and who has been waiting patiently underneath all of the noise and the weight to be heard again. Do not dismiss those moments when they come. Do not tell yourself you are imagining it, or that it will not last, or that you have felt this way before and been disappointed. When the clarity comes, receive it. When the lightness arrives, welcome it. When the inner voice speaks with confidence rather than doubt, write down what it says, because what is emerging in your interior life right now is the foundation of everything that is about to become visible. The inner shift always precedes the outer shift, always. You are feeling the inner shift. The outer shift is on its way. The second area that is about to change is your relationships. And I want to be honest with you about how this is going to feel before I describe what it is going to produce. Because the way relationship change happens in a Kairos season is not always comfortable. At least, not at first. What you are going to notice is that certain connections in your life begin to naturally, quietly, without drama, create distance. Not through conflict necessarily, though sometimes through that too, but more. Often simply through a growing sense that the fit is no longer right. People who were central to your daily life will begin to occupy a different space. Conversations that once felt sustaining will begin to feel effortful, and you will find yourself, perhaps with some guilt, feeling less urgency to maintain proximity to people and places that you have always considered fixed parts of your landscape. I want you to understand what this is. It is not you becoming cold. It is not ingratitude. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you or with the people involved. It is repositioning. The relationships that are creating distance right now are doing so because they belong to the season that is ending, not the season that is beginning. Heaven is not cruel about this process. It does not strip away covering without providing new covering. It does not close one relational door without opening another. But the timing is almost never simultaneous. There is often a gap between the closing and the opening, where you will feel more alone than you have felt in a while. And I need you to be prepared for that gap rather than frightened by it, because the gap is not evidence that you are being abandoned. It is the space in which the new is being prepared to arrive, and the new will arrive. At a moment you are not expecting, in a form you may not initially recognize. A person will appear in your life whose presence will feel different from the start. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, but simply right in a way that you will not be able to fully explain. They will understand things about you that you have never had to explain. They will carry a frequency that matches yours. They will speak a language of purpose and depth that you have been hungry for through years of conversations that stayed on the surface. These are your Kairos relationships. These are the people who belong to the chapter that is beginning, and they are already being positioned to find you. The third area that is about to change is your sense of purpose and direction. For a long time, the question of what you are supposed to do, the specific, practical, actionable answer to the question of your calling, has felt either overwhelming in its enormity or frustratingly unclear in its particulars. You have known in a general sense that you are made for something significant. You have felt the weight of a purpose that is larger than your current circumstances. But the specific next step, the concrete, practical, today-sized action that connects where you are to where you are going, is often felt hidden behind a fog of uncertainty that no amount of thinking or praying or planning has been able to fully dissolve. That is about to change. Not because you are going to suddenly receive a comprehensive 5-year plan with every detail filled in, but because the Kairos season operates differently from the seasons that came before it. In a waiting season, clarity is withheld as part of the preparation. In a Kairos season, clarity is released in direct proportion to your willingness to take the step that is currently visible. And what I am hearing for chosen ones in this particular moment is this. The next step is already visible. You already know what it is. You have known for a while. It is the thing you keep circling back to, the idea you keep returning to, the conversation you keep almost having, the project you keep almost beginning, the door you keep almost knocking on. The uncertainty has not been about whether that step is the right one. The uncertainty has been about whether you are ready, whether the timing is right, whether the support will be there, whether it will work. And the answer to all of those questions in this Kairos season is yes. You are ready. The timing is now. The support is being assembled. It will work, though not always in the exact form you are imagining, because the form it takes will be better than the form you planned. I need to tell you something important about what not to do during this period, because the transition between seasons is a vulnerable time, and there are specific patterns that chosen ones fall into during Kairos, moments that delay the very things that are trying to arrive. The first thing not to do is to manufacture urgency that is not yours. When you sense that things are shifting, when you feel the movement beginning, there is a temptation to force the pace, to push, to make things happen. Through sheer will, because the waiting has been so long and the readiness feels so complete that the idea of waiting one more day feels unbearable. Resist that. The shift that is happening in this season is not the result of your pushing. It is the result of your positioning. Continue to practice the 7-minute return. Continue to use the genius wave to keep your brain operating at the frequency of reception rather than the frequency of striving. The posture of this season is not aggressive pursuit, it is prepared presence. The second thing not to do is to disqualify yourself from what is arriving based on the evidence of where you have been. The version of you that the waiting produced, the one who is more patient, more grounded, more genuinely compassionate, more deeply rooted than the version that first received the promise, is more than qualified for what is coming. Do not let the memory of the hard season convince you that you are too marked or too far behind to step fully into what is beginning. You are not those things. You are forged. There is a difference between a person who is exhausted and a person who has been through fire and come out with a different quality of strength. You are the second kind. The third thing not to do is to wait for external confirmation before you begin to move internally. The external confirmation is coming, but it will be drawn toward the version of you who has already begun to move, who has already begun to speak differently about your own life, who has already begun to carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that what has been appointed for them is on its way. Confirmation follows posture. Posture precedes breakthrough. Begin to carry yourself as someone whose Kairos has arrived, because it has. If you are feeling this movement right now, if there is something in your chest that is recognizing what I am describing, if there is a part of you that is saying, yes, this is exactly what I have been feeling but could not name, then I want you to do something. Type the word receive in the comments right now. Just that one word, because receive is both an acknowledgement and a declaration. It is the posture of someone who is no longer braced against their own blessing. It is the posture of someone who is open, who is present, who is standing at the threshold of the Kairos season, with their hands unclenched and their heart unlocked. Type receive, because you are ready, because the shift is real, because what is coming is already on its way to you, and because the chosen ones who arrive at their appointed time are the ones who learned, somewhere in the long middle of the waiting, how to stand in readiness without demanding that the readiness produce something on their schedule. You have learned that. You have lived that. And now the time is here. You have come so far in this message, and I do not say that as a formality. I say it because the person who arrived at the beginning of what you have been listening to and the person who is here now at this point in the message are not quite the same person. Something has been deposited in you through each section of this word. Something has been named that needed naming. Something has been released that needed releasing. Something has been confirmed that you have been carrying alone for long. Enough, and now I want to do something specific. I want to give you a name. Not the name your parents gave you, though that name is good and it is yours. I want to give you the name of who you are becoming through this season. Because one of the things that the long waiting takes from a chosen one, quietly and without announcement, is the narrative of their own becoming. When you are in the middle of a difficult season, the story you tell about yourself tends to collapse into the present tense of the difficulty. You become the person who is waiting, the person who is struggling, the person who has not yet. And that language, repeated often enough, begins to feel like identity rather than circumstance. So today, I want to replace that language with something truer. I want to give you the name that heaven has been calling you through every year of the waiting, the name that describes not where you have been, but what you have been becoming while you were there. Your name is Cycle Breaker. This is not a motivational label. This is a specific, serious, sacred designation. A cycle breaker is someone who arrives in a family, in a community, in a generation, carrying the capacity and the calling to interrupt patterns that have been running for longer than they have been alive. Patterns of lack, patterns of limitation, patterns of silence about things that needed to be spoken, patterns of settling for less than what was promised, patterns of pain that were handed down from one generation to the next, not because anyone wanted to pass them on, but because no one in the line before them had the formation, the clarity, the courage, and the specific kind of spiritual endurance required to stand in the gap and say, "This pattern ends with me." That is you. That is what the long season has been forming in you. Not just patience, not just resilience in the general sense, but the specific, particular, hard-won capacity to absorb the weight of generational patterns without being destroyed by them, and then to choose, in the midst of that weight, a different direction. You did not break in the waiting. You were shaped by it. And the shape you have been given is the shape of someone who can carry what others could not, hold what others dropped, and remain standing in places where the people who came before you had to sit down. This is why the difficulty was not incidental. This is why the Kairos required such a long chronos. Because what heaven was building in you was not just a blessing for you. It was a turning point for everyone connected to you. The cycles that stop with you do not just change your story. They change the story of the people who come after you, the children who will not carry what you carried, the community that will be different because you were willing to stand in the gap, the generation that will begin in a different place because you refused to let the patterns that tried to define You have the final word about where your line goes. Cycle breaker, that is your name. Carry it. Now I want to take you somewhere. I want to guide you through a brief visualization exercise. And I want to ask you to stay with me in it, even if this kind of practice is new to you. Because what I am about to describe is not imagination for its own sake. It is a way of accessing something that your spirit already knows, but that your mind has been too busy managing the difficulty to fully see. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical one, a specific one, a doorway wide and solid, set into a wall that stretches as far as you can see in both directions. The door itself is open. It has been open for some time. You are standing just outside it, with one foot on the ground behind you and one hand resting on the frame in front of you. You are not inside yet. You are at the threshold, which is the most sacred place in any transition. The place that is neither the old nor the new, but the exact point where one becomes the other. Now, without moving forward, turn and look back. Look at the road you came in on. Look at the length of it. Look at the terrain. The places where the ground was rough and you had to slow your pace. The places where the road narrowed and you were not sure there was enough room to keep moving. The places where you sat down for a while because the distance ahead looked longer than the strength you had left. Look at all of it, not with the eyes of regret, not with the eyes of grief, though those feelings are allowed to be present, but with the eyes of someone who sees the whole road for the first time as a single continuous thing, rather than a series of separate difficulties. And as you look at that road, I want you to notice something. Every single step of it leads here. There is not one detour, not one delay, not one season of difficulty that does not connect directly to the threshold where you are standing right now. The road did not wander. It was not random. It was a direct route to this exact door, built through the exact terrain that was required to form the exact version of you who is capable of walking through it. Now look up. Look through the open door. Do not try to see too far. Do not strain for the full picture of what is on the other side, because the full picture is not what this moment requires. What you need to see right now is just the quality of the light. And the light on the other side of the door is different from the light on the road behind you. It is not the gray light of endurance. It is not the dim light of survival. It is the kind of light that belongs to a morning that has been a long time coming, clear and warm, and full of a quality that can only be described as arrival. The light of someone who has been through the wilderness and is now standing at the edge of the land that was always theirs. Now look down at where your feet are. You are at the threshold. You are not approaching it. You are not still on the road, hoping to reach it someday. You are here, right now, in this moment, on the exact boundary between the season that ends and the season that begins. And the only thing between you and the other side of that door is the step, just the step. One movement of your body and your will and your trust all together in the same direction. One moment of deciding that the light on the other side is worth leaving the familiar weight of the road behind you. That step is not a leap of blind faith into darkness. It is a step across a threshold whose door is already open, into a light that is already there, by a person who is already standing at exactly the right place at exactly the right time. You are already there. You are already at the threshold. You are already the cycle breaker standing at the door of the chapter your entire road was built to reach. Now, I want to speak something over you, not as a performance, not as a formula, but as a sincere word from someone who has been in this message with you, who has sat with your pain and your waiting and your grief and your readiness, and who wants to leave something specific on your spirit before we move toward the final sections of what you need to hear today. May the clarity that has been withheld from you return now with a directness that surprises you. May the relationships that are being prepared for you arrive with a recognition that feels like coming home. May the resources and the opportunities and the doors belong to your Kairos season begin to make themselves visible in the coming days in ways you cannot miss and cannot explain, except by the grace of the one who appointed them for you. May the patterns that stop with you stop completely and permanently. May the children and the people connected to your life begin to inherit a different kind of story because of the stand you have taken in this season. May the grief you have carried be honored, and may it be redeemed, not erased but transformed into the specific compassion that allows you to sit with others in their pain the way you needed someone to sit with you. May the 7 minutes you practice each day become a well that never runs dry. May the frequency your brain is returning to become the natural atmosphere of your daily life. May the Kairos that is active around you right now be recognized by you in every form it takes, no matter how quietly it arrives. And may you carry your name, Cycle Breaker, not as a burden but as an honor, not as a weight, but as a calling, not as something you have to prove but as something you already are, already have been, and will continue to be, for everyone whose road is made easier because you were willing to walk yours all the way to the threshold. You are seen, you are known, you are exactly where you are supposed to be, and the door is open. You are standing at the threshold, and that is not a passive place to be. The threshold is not a waiting room. It is not a holding area where you stay until something outside of you gives you permission to move. The threshold is the place of active decision, the place where the formation of the long season meets the first action of the new one, the place where everything you have been becoming begins to express itself in the specific, practical, today-sized movements that will shape the chapter you are walking into. And so I want to be practical with you now. I want to move from the language of vision and identity into the language of action, because you are not someone who needs only to be inspired. You are someone who is ready to move, and readiness without direction is just energy looking for a wall to run into. So let me give you the direction. The question that chosen ones carry most persistently through their seasons of transition is not whether things are going to change. By this point in this message, something in you has settled that question. Things are changing. The shift is real. The Kairos is active. The appointed time is not a concept anymore. It is the current quality of the air around your life. The question that remains, the one that sits at the edge of all the revelation and all the naming and all the confirmation, is the practical one. What do I actually do right now today with these specific hands and this specific life and these specific circumstances that have not yet visibly transformed? That question is not a lack of faith. It is the responsible question of a person who understands that divine appointments require human participation. Heaven moves. You move with it. That is the partnership. That is how the Kairos becomes visible. So here is what you do. The first thing you do right now is assess the current state of your relationships with honesty and without guilt. Not dramatically. Not with the intention of making immediate decisions or having difficult conversations today. Simply, honestly. Sit with the question of which relationships in your life currently give you energy and which ones consistently drain it. Not the relationships that require something from you. Those are not the same as draining ones, because love always requires something, and that is not a problem. But the relationships that leave you consistently smaller after every interaction, consistently less yourself, consistently more uncertain about who you are and what you are worth. Those relationships are not your assignment for this season. And the practical action here is simple. You do not have to end anything today. You do not have to make announcements or send difficult messages. You simply begin to be more intentional about where you place your relational energy. You begin to invest more in the connections that carry life and less in the ones that carry weight. You begin to create, very gently and very deliberately, the relational space that the new people of your Kairos season will need in order to find you, because they are coming. I said this in the previous section, and I want to say it again with more specificity because it matters. The people who belong to your next chapter are not random. They are not people you will stumble into by accident. They are chosen ones themselves, people who have been through their own versions of the long season, people who carry a frequency that matches yours, people who will recognize you the way you recognize a word in a language you thought you had forgotten, but have always known. They will appear in the spaces you create. They will arrive in the places you show up to with your full self, rather than the managed, protected, carefully edited version of yourself that the long season taught you to present. And when they arrive, you will know. Not because of dramatic signs, though sometimes there are those too, but because of the simple, undeniable quality of feeling at home in a way you have not felt for a very long time. Your practical action for relationships right now is this. Begin to show up in one space, physical or virtual, where people who carry a similar sense of purpose and depth gather. A community, a group, a gathering of people who are serious about the things you are serious about. You do not have to perform. You do not have to have your story fully assembled. You just have to show up as you are, at the threshold, at the beginning of the new chapter, willing to be known. That willingness is the magnet. The right people will respond to it. The second area of practical action is purpose and direction. And I want to address the specific paralysis that most chosen ones experience in this area, because it is real and it is common. And it has a very specific cause that most people have not correctly identified. The paralysis around purpose in a season of transition is almost never about not knowing what to do. It is almost always about not trusting that the thing you know to do is actually the right thing. You have the idea. You have been carrying it for months, possibly years. You have returned to it again and again in the quiet moments, in the dreams, in the spaces between the noise. You have felt the pull of it, the rightness of it, the way it seems to connect everything about who you are into a single direction. But you have not moved on it. And the reason you have not moved on it is not laziness, and it is not fear in the ordinary sense. It is the accumulated hesitation of someone who has been disappointed enough times to develop a protective distance between themselves and their own deepest knowing. The practical action here requires you to do one thing, just one, today or tomorrow morning at the latest. Take the idea, the direction, the calling that has been living in you through the waiting and write it down in a single sentence. Not a business plan, not a strategy, not a comprehensive vision document. One sentence. The sentence that says, in plain language, what it is that you are moving toward. Something like this. I am building something that helps people do this specific thing. Or this. I am returning to this specific work that I was made for. Or this. I am stepping into this specific role that I have been prepared for through everything I have been through. One sentence. Write it down, say it out loud, and then take the smallest possible action in its direction. Not the whole plan. The first step. The email you have been not sending. The conversation you have been not starting. The page you have been not opening. The enrollment you have been not completing. One step. Just the first one. Because in a Kairos season, the first step draws the second one toward you. You do not need to see the whole staircase. You need to take the first step and trust that the next one will be there when your foot reaches for it. And it will be. Because you are not stepping in your own strength. You are stepping in the momentum of a Kairos that has been building for years. The appointed time carries its own forward movement. You do not have to generate all the energy yourself. You just have to participate. The third area of practical action is resources and opportunities. And this is where I want to address something that many chosen ones carry without realizing how deeply it has shaped their relationship with provision. After a long season of scarcity, whether financial, relational, professional, or simply the scarcity of feeling seen and supported, the nervous system develops a default orientation toward lack. It begins to expect the absence of enough. It begins to manage around the assumption of shortage. It begins to plan for the worst, because the worst has felt like the most reliable forecast for so long. And this orientation, while it made complete sense as a survival mechanism in the difficult season, becomes a barrier in the Kairos season. Because the Kairos season does not respond to the frequency of lack. It responds to the frequency of prepared reception. What this means practically is that there are specific things you need to begin doing differently in your relationship with resources and opportunity. The first is to stop apologizing for having needs. Stop minimizing what you require in order to do what you were made to do. Stop presenting yourself as someone who can manage with less, who does not need much, who will be fine without the support. That posture was protective in the hard season. In the Kairos season, it is a barrier. Begin to be honest with yourself first and then with others about what you actually need. The resources that belong to your chapter are not going to find their way to a version of you that has learned to hide what it needs. The second is to begin noticing opportunities that arrive in unfamiliar packaging. The Kairos season delivers provision in ways that do not always look like what you expected. A door that opens in a field adjacent to the ones you were focused on. An offer that is smaller than what you imagined, but is actually the precise first step toward the larger thing. A resource that arrives through a channel you did not think to look through. The chosen one who is operating at their Kairos frequency recognizes these things as what they are. The chosen one who is still running the scarcity program dismisses them as not quite right or not quite enough. Practice saying yes to the first step of provision, even when it does not look like the final picture. The third is to stop fighting for what is yours and start standing in it. There is a difference between striving for your due and inhabiting your due. Striving looks like constant effort, constant proof, constant performance of worthiness. Inhabiting looks like a settled confidence that what belongs to your chapter will find you because it was appointed for you, not earned by you through sufficient struggle. This does not mean passivity. It means moving from a place of ownership rather than a place of pursuit. You do not chase what is already yours. You show up in the place where it is waiting and you receive it. This is also the moment where I want to speak directly about the tool that has been offered to you in this message. The Genius Wave is a resource that belongs in the Kairos season. Not because it is magic, not because it replaces the spiritual work or the practical action, but because the Kairos season requires your brain to be operating at the frequency of reception, creativity, clarity, and inspired action. And the brain that has been through a long season of difficulty needs support, returning to that frequency. Dr. Rivers spent more than 30 years developing the specific, precise, scientifically grounded audio tool that gives your brain that support in just 7 minutes a day. If you have not yet accessed it through the link in the pinned comment, this is the moment I want to invite you to do that. Not because of pressure, not because the window is closing, though the $39 access point is time limited, but because you are standing at a threshold right now, and the practical tools that support your crossing belong in your hands before you take the step, not after. The practical action for this moment is simple. Take the next step. In your relationships, create space for the new. In your purpose, write the one sentence and take the first step. In your resources, stop apologizing for your needs and start recognizing provision in the forms it is actually taking. And in your daily practice, commit to the 7 minutes that keep your brain and your spirit aligned with the frequency of the season you are walking into. You are not someone who needs to be convinced that change is possible. You have survived enough to know that things change. What you need to know, and what I am telling you with full confidence, is that the change that is coming in this season is not just the ordinary kind. It is the appointed kind. It is the kind that was set before you were born, prepared through everything you have been through, and released now in this Kairos moment for a cycle breaker who has been standing at the threshold long enough. Take the step. The ground on the other side is solid. It has been waiting for your foot. We have traveled a long way together in this message. And before I say anything else, before I offer any final word or closing call or gentle invitation, I want to stop and acknowledge something that I do not take for granted. You stayed. Through every section of this message, through the naming of the pain and the science and the ancient language, and the practical steps and the visualization, and the naming of who you are, you stayed. And I want you to know that the part of you that stayed, the part that kept listening, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it reached places that were tender, even when the message asked you to sit with grief before it offered you hope, that part of you is not a small thing. It is the most important thing. It is the evidence of a chosen one who has not given up on being found by what was always meant to find them. I see that in you. I want to say it plainly. Not as a performance of pastoral warmth, not as a technique to keep you engaged, but as a sincere acknowledgement from someone who has been in the room with your real experience through every word of this message. You showed up, you stayed, and that matters more than you know. There is something else I want you to know. Right now, in this exact moment, as these words reach you wherever you are sitting or standing, or lying or driving, you are not alone in this experience. Across the world, in different time zones, in different languages, in different degrees of exhaustion and hope and quiet readiness, other chosen ones are walking into this exact same message. Some of them are in their cars, on the way home from jobs that have not yet become what they were meant to become. Some of them are sitting on the edge of beds in rooms that feel too small for the life pressing against the inside of their chest. Some of them are in their kitchens at hours when the rest of their household is asleep, searching in the dark for the word that will make the next day bearable. And every single one of them is hearing what you heard. Every single one of them is being named the way you were named. Every single one of them is standing at a threshold that has been custom built for them by a season of preparation that only they could have survived in exactly the way they survived it. You are part of a company of people who were set apart before the difficulty began, who were marked before the waiting started, who were chosen not in spite of the hard road, but specifically because the hard road was required to form the specific version of them that the appointed time needs. You are not an isolated case. You are not an outlier. You are one of many who are waking up in this season to the reality of who they have been all along. And the waking up is happening together across distance, across language, across every barrier that would otherwise separate you from the knowledge that your experience is shared. Your calling is real, and your kairos is not theoretical. It is now. I want to ask you to do something before you carry this message into the rest of your day. I want to ask you to lay something down, not permanently, not as an act of resignation, but as a deliberate, conscious, chosen release of the weight that you have been carrying in your body and your spirit through the long season. Imagine, right now, that everything heavy you brought into this message is sitting beside you. The grief of the years, the grief of the relationships that did not become what they could have been, the grief of the career ground that the waiting took, the grief of the dreams you learned to say more quietly, the doubt about your own discernment, the exhaustion of continuing to believe through seasons that did not confirm your belief with visible evidence. Imagine all of it gathered beside you, the way you might imagine a bag you have been carrying for a very long distance. Now imagine setting it down, not throwing it away, because the weight you carried was real, and the years it represents are real, and the losses are real, and they deserve to be honored rather than discarded. But setting it down at the threshold, leaving it at the door, because the version of you who is stepping into the Kairos season does not carry the weight of the wilderness season with them. You carry the formation, you carry the depth, you carry the compassion and the patience and the rootedness that the hard road built in you. But the weight itself, the grief, the doubt, the exhaustion of striving without receiving, that weight belongs at the door. It does not cross the threshold with you. Set it down. You have carried it faithfully and long enough. It has served its purpose. And the hands that are now free from its weight are the hands that will build what the next chapter requires. Now, I want to speak to the part of you that almost did not click on this message today. The part that has heard similar things before and has learned to hold a careful distance between itself and hope, because hope that does not arrive in the expected form is its own kind of loss. I want to speak to that part with total honesty. I am not going to promise you that everything changes tomorrow morning when you wake up. I am not going to tell you that the difficulty evaporates at the end of this video, or that the Kairos season means the absence of all challenge. What I am going to tell you is that something is different now about the quality of the road ahead, and the difference is not primarily in the external circumstances. The difference is in you, in the naming that happened in this message, in the release that happened at the threshold, in the understanding of Kairos and appointed time and cycle breaker identity that has been deposited in you today. Those things do not leave with the video. They stay. And a chosen one who is walking forward with those things in their possession is a different kind of walker than the one who began this message. The road may have the same terrain in places, but you are not the same person on it. I want to ask something of you now, and I want to ask it in the way that feels most honest to me, which is not as a transaction, but as an invitation between chosen ones who recognize each other. If this message reached you today, if it found the tender place and named the real thing, and gave language to what you have been carrying alone, then I want to ask you to help it reach someone else who needs it just as much as you did when you first pressed play. Not for my sake, not for the metrics of a channel or the vanity of numbers, but because somewhere in your life right now there is a person who is in the middle of their long season, who is carrying the weight without anyone to name it for them, who is lying awake at 2 a.m, without the language for what they are feeling, who would be changed by hearing what you just heard. Share this message with that person. You know who they are. You have probably thought of them at least once while listening. Send it to them without explanation if you need to. Just send it. Let the message say what you do not have the words for yet. That act of sharing is not a small thing. It is a chosen one saying to another chosen one, I see you, I found something, and I am bringing it back for you. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I want to gently invite you to do that now, not because of obligation, but because the next message is already being prepared, and it is for you, and the easiest way to make sure it finds you before you have to go looking for it is to already be here. Like this video if it reached you. Not as a performance of appreciation, but as a signal to the spaces where other chosen ones are searching, so that this word can travel further than either of us could send it alone. And if you are in a position to support this work financially, if this message gave you something real, and you want to help make sure it continues to be made, and continues to reach the people who need it, the link to donate is below this video. Give what feels true. Give what feels like a genuine reflection of what this message was worth to you today. Not out of pressure, not out of guilt. Out of the recognition that messages like this one require resources to produce and distribute, and that your contribution is not just supporting a channel. It is funding the moment when another chosen one, somewhere in the world, on a difficult Monday morning without anyone to name their season for them, finds this word and feels for the first time in a long time that they are seen. And if the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the science of theta and gamma frequencies and the 7 minutes of daily practice spoke to something in you that recognized it as the right tool for this season, if something in you said yes when Dr. Rivers' work was described, and you have been carrying that yes through the rest of the message, then it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee, the frequency of the chosen, available to you today. You came into this message carrying something heavy. You are leaving it as a cycle breaker standing at an open door. Everything the long season prepared in you is now active. Everything the Kairos has appointed for you is now in motion. The relationships, the purpose, the resources, the clarity, the rest, the belonging, the confirmation. All of it is moving toward you at the speed of an appointed time that cannot be delayed and cannot be canceled. Walk forward. The threshold is behind you now. You have already crossed it. You just have to keep moving in the direction of the light.